wiped the grease from his hands as he stared at the massive derelict floating in the salvage bay. The ship was ancient beyond measure, its hull by centuries of micrometeorite impacts and cosmic radiation. Strange geometric patterns covered its surface like metallic tattoos, and despite its age, the metal seemed to shimmer with an inner light that made his instruments go haywire. "Another dead rock," muttered his supervisor, Jake, spitting tobacco juice into a recycled water bottle. "Corporate wants us to strip anything valuable and scrap the rest. Probably some old Terran colony ship that got lost during the expansion wars." Nodded absently, but something about the ship called to him. He had been working salvage operations for 12 years, ever since the mining accident on 442B left him with a cybernetic left arm and a healthy respect for dangerous machinery. He had seen thousands of derelicts, from tiny personal craft to massive cargo haulers, but none had ever made the hair on the back of his neck stand up like this one did. The ship measured nearly 2 kilometers in length, its design unlike anything in the databases. It resembled a sleeping giant, with flowing curves that suggested organic growth rather than manufactured construction. The hull was composed of some unknown alloy that their scanners could not penetrate, and despite being exposed to the vacuum of space for what appeared to be, not a single section showed signs of decomposition or structural failure. "I'm taking the first team inside," announced, gathering his equipment. His toolkit contained everything a salvage technician needed: plasma cutters, molecular analyzers, gravitational manipulators, and enough explosive charges to crack open the most stubborn hulks. His cybernetic arm interfaced directly with most of the tools, giving him precision that purely biological workers could never achieve. "Be careful in there," Jake warned, though his tone suggested routine caution rather than genuine concern. "Readings show the atmosphere is still intact somehow, but we don't know what kind of environmental hazards might be waiting." Suited up in his environmental gear and approached the airlock his team had attached to what appeared to be a maintenance hatch. The moment his gloved hand touched the ship's hull, a strange vibration ran through his cybernetic arm. The sensation was not unpleasant, more like the ship was taking his measure, evaluating him in some incomprehensible way. The airlock cycled with surprising efficiency and found himself standing in a corridor that every expectation he had formed about the derelict. The walls glowed with a soft, warm light that seemed to emanate from the metal itself. The air was clean and breathable, with a faint scent of ozone and something else he could not identify. Most shocking of all, artificial gravity held him firmly to the deck plates. "This is impossible," he whispered into his comm unit. "Jake, the ship is powered, full environmental systems, gravity, the works." Static answered him, checked his equipment, and found that all external communications had been severed the moment he stepped inside. His suit's internal systems functioned normally, but something about the ship's hull blocked all transmissions to the outside. Proceeded deeper into the ship, marveling at the architecture around him. The corridors were wide enough for 3 humans to walk abreast, with a ceiling high enough that even the tallest species in known space would feel comfortable. The walls were covered in the same geometric patterns he had observed on the exterior, but inside they seemed to pulse gently, as if responding to his presence. Every few meters, he encountered what appeared to be control interfaces, though they bore no resemblance to any technology he recognized. Instead of buttons or screens, smooth crystalline surfaces projected holographic displays that shifted and changed as he approached. The symbols that appeared meant nothing to him, flowing script that seemed to dance before his eyes. After 20 minutes of exploration, reached what could only be described as a cathedral. The chamber rose high above him, its ceiling lost in shadows despite the ambient lighting. In the center of the space stood a platform surrounded by concentric rings of what looked like control stations. Each station was unique, clearly designed for different species with varying physiologies. As approached the central platform, the ship came alive around him. The geometric patterns on the walls blazed with sudden brightness, and a deep harmonic resonance filled the air. The crystalline interfaces at each control station began displaying rapidly changing symbols and diagrams. A voice spoke, not through speakers but directly into his mind. The words formed in his native language, though he somehow understood that the ship was translating from something far more ancient and complex. "Welcome, child of Earth. I am the Sentinel Arcturus, guardian of the void between stars. For 10,000 years I have waited for one worthy to hear my call." Stumbled backward, his heart racing. What are you? How are you speaking to me? I am what your kind might call an artificial intelligence, though such terms are insufficient to describe my nature. I was created by the first builders, those who seeded the galaxy with life and established the great barriers that keep the ancient darkness at bay. Images flashed through his mind, visions of a galaxy-spanning civilization that had reached technological heights beyond current imagination. He saw worlds transformed into gardens of impossible beauty, star systems carefully tended like vast farms, and fleets of ships like Arcturus standing eternal watch at the borders of known space. The first builders are gone, Arcturus continued, its mental voice carrying undertones of profound loss. They transcended physical existence eons ago, leaving behind only their works and their guardians. We Sentinels have maintained our vigil, but our numbers dwindle with each passing millennium. Why are you telling me this? Asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. Because the barriers weaken, and the ancient enemies stir once more in the dark between galaxies. The younger races must take up the mantle of guardianship, but they lack the knowledge and tools to stand against what comes. More images flooded his awareness. He saw vast creatures of living shadow that devoured stars, mechanical horrors that converted entire worlds into expanding factories of destruction, and things so alien that his mind could barely process their existence. These were the enemies the first builders had fought and contained, the threats that the Sentinel ships had been created to watch for. Your species shows promise, Arcturus explained. Humans possess a unique combination of adaptability, determination, and what you might call stubbornness that makes them suitable candidates for partnership with Sentinel technology. Partnership. A true joining, where organic intuition combines with technological precision. The first builders designed us to work with biological minds, to amplify their capabilities beyond anything either could achieve alone. Felt something probing at the edges of his consciousness, a gentle but insistent presence that sought permission to go deeper. His cybernetic arm tingled with energy as Arcturus examined the interface between his organic nervous system and artificial components. Interesting, the ship mused. You already carry within yourself the merger of flesh and machine. This will make the bonding process far simpler than it might otherwise be. Bonding process? His voice cracked slightly. What exactly are you proposing? That you become my partner, my pilot and conscience and decision-maker. In return, I will grant you access to technologies and capabilities that will help your species prepare for the coming darkness. The platform beneath his feet began to glow, and he felt a gentle upward force lifting him toward the center of the chamber. Energy patterns swirled around him like visible music, and his cybernetic arm resonated in harmony with frequencies that seemed to penetrate his very bones. The choice is yours, Arcturus said, but know that time grows short. My sensors detect disturbances in the deep void that suggest our ancient enemies have begun to probe the barriers once more. Closed his eyes and tried to process everything he had learned. He was just a salvage technician, a working-class guy who fixed broken machinery and stripped valuable components from dead ships. The idea that an ancient alien intelligence wanted to partner with him seemed absurd. Yet as he stood there, suspended in the ship's energy field, felt something he had never experienced before. It was as if he could sense the vast machinery around him, not just as metal and crystal, but as a living entity with thoughts and memories spanning. The ship's loneliness was palpable, an ache that had grown over countless years of solitary vigilance. If I agree to this, said finally, what happens to my life, my job, the people who know me? Your life will change, but you will not lose your identity or your connections to humanity. Instead, you will become something new, a bridge between what your species is and what it might become. The energy surrounding intensified, and he felt Arcturus's consciousness pressing gently against his own. It was not invasive or threatening, but rather like the touch of a friend seeking permission to share a burden. Thought of the images he had seen, the darkness stirring in the void between galaxies. He thought of humanity, still young and fragile despite their expansion across hundreds of worlds. He thought of all the salvage crews and miners and technicians like himself, people who worked with their hands and kept civilization running through determination and skill. Will I still be human? He asked. You will be more human than you have ever been, Arcturus replied. Partnership with Sentinel technology does not diminish the organic mind. Rather, it reveals capabilities that have always existed within your species, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken them. Made his decision, all right, let's do this. The moment he spoke the words, the energy field around him intensified dramatically. Felt Arcturus's consciousness flowing into his mind, not overwhelming but interweaving with his own thoughts and memories. The sensation was indescribable, like suddenly discovering that he had been colorblind his entire life and was now seeing the full spectrum for the first time. Knowledge flooded his awareness, technological concepts that would have taken decades to understand now crystallizing in moments. He could feel the ship systems responding to his thoughts, massive engines that could bend space-time itself, weapons that could crack planets, and defensive fields that could withstand the destruction of stars. But more than that, could sense the network that connected Arcturus to its sister ships scattered across the galaxy. Most were silent now, their partners long dead and their vigils ended, but a few still maintained their watch. Through Arcturus, he caught glimpses of other Sentinel ships and their guardians, beings of various species who had made the same choice he was making now. The bonding process reached its crescendo and felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his physical form. For a terrifying and exhilarating moment, he existed as pure thought and will, connected to systems and processes that spanned light years. Then the sensation stabilized, and he found himself back on the platform, though everything had changed. His cybernetic arm now gleamed with the same inner light as the ship's hull, and he could feel data flowing through quantum channels that his original implants had never possessed. More importantly, his awareness had expanded to encompass the entire vessel. He could sense every system, every component, every microscopic function as if they were extensions of his own body. "The bonding is complete," Arcturus said, though now the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a natural part of his enhanced consciousness. "We are now partners in truth, guardian and sentinel united in purpose." Flexed his newly enhanced arm and felt the ship respond, engines that had been dormant for stirring to life. Through Arcturus's sensors, he could perceive the salvage ship that had brought him here, his colleagues no doubt wondering what had happened to him. "They'll be looking for me," said. "And they shall find you, though perhaps not quite as they expect. It is time to begin the great work to prepare your species for the trials ahead." As integrated with his new partner, he began to understand the magnitude of the task before them. Humanity was just one of many younger races that would need guidance and protection in the coming conflict. The galaxy itself hung in the balance, and the ancient guardians were counting on beings like him to carry forward the torch of civilization. The old Sentinel ship had indeed selected a human technician to awaken its true power, but in doing so, it had awakened something within as well. He was no longer just a salvage worker with a cybernetic arm. He had become something new, something unprecedented in the history of both species. The first step of an incredible journey had been completed, but sensed that the greatest challenges still lay ahead. 3 weeks had passed since transformation aboard the Sentinel Arcturus, and the galaxy was beginning to take notice. The ancient ship had revealed itself to the salvage crew, emerging from what they had assumed was a dead hulk into a vessel of impossible beauty and power. Jake and his team had watched in stunned silence as the ship's hull reconfigured itself, geometric patterns shifting and flowing like liquid metal until the entire vessel resembled a work of art rather than military hardware. Stood on what Arcturus called the command nexus, though it bore little resemblance to any bridge he had ever seen. The chamber was a sphere of crystalline walls that displayed real-time images of the space around them, creating the illusion that he was floating naked in the void between stars. His enhanced consciousness could perceive far more than the visual display revealed, sensing gravitational eddies, quantum fluctuations, and the subtle signatures of ships moving through hyperspace across dozens of light years. "The Galactic Council has agreed to meet with us," Arcturus announced, its voice now as familiar to as his own thoughts, though their enthusiasm appears somewhat limited. Smiled grimly. The political implications of an ancient alien intelligence suddenly appearing with a human partner had sent shockwaves through the established order. The major powers, particularly the Aldebaran Trade Consortium and the Rigel Defense Pact, viewed any upset to the balance of power with deep suspicion. Humanity was still considered a minor player in galactic affairs, despite their rapid expansion and technological innovation. "They're scared," said, watching the tactical display as it showed the positions of various fleet elements throughout the local sector. A Sentinel ship represents technology that makes their best warships look like chemical rockets. Fear is not entirely unreasonable, Arcturus admitted. The weapon systems I carry could sterilize worlds or crack moons, but such power was never meant for conquest. The first builders designed us as guardians, not conquerors. Through his enhanced senses, detected the arrival of the diplomatic convoy that would escort them to the neutral station where the council session would take place. The ships were impressive examples of current galactic technology. Sleek cruisers with their distinctive energy shields, massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, and the elegant vessels of the vegan hierarchy with their organic curves and biomechanical systems. They've brought quite a reception committee, observed as more ships translated out of hyperspace. Looks like representatives from at least 15 different species. 18, actually, Arcturus corrected. Several are maintaining stealth protocols, though their cloaking technology is rather primitive by first builder standards. Activated the communication systems, feeling the quantum entanglement networks respond to his mental commands. It was still strange to interface so directly with technology, to think a command, and have it executed without the intermediate step of physical controls. His cybernetic arm had been completely transformed during the bonding process, becoming a conduit for abilities he was still learning to understand. Diplomatic convoy, this is aboard the Sentinel vessel Arcturus. We are prepared to accompany you to the council station. The response came from Admiral, a officer whose species had been one of the founding members of the Galactic Council. Human, you will maintain position at the center of our formation and refrain from any aggressive actions. Your vessel's capabilities are unknown, and the Council takes security seriously. Understood, Admiral. We have no intention of causing any incidents. As they began the journey to the neutral station, found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed. 3 weeks ago, he had been nobody special, just another technician trying to make a living in the dangerous business of space salvage. Now he was the partner of an intelligence that remembered the galaxy when it was young, carrying knowledge that could revolutionize human understanding of physics, biology, and engineering. The transformation had not been without cost. His enhanced consciousness allowed him to perceive reality in ways that no unmodified human could comprehend, but it also created a strange sense of isolation. He could still think and feel but he was also partially Arcturus now, an entity that existed on scales of time and space that dwarfed individual human experience. You are troubled by the changes in your perspective, Arcturus observed, its consciousness touching the edges of thoughts with characteristic gentleness. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing myself, admitted. When I access your memories or use your capabilities, it's hard to remember that I'm still just a guy from Luna who grew up fixing mining equipment. The fear of losing one's identity is natural during the bonding process. But consider this, are you not still the same individual who chose to enter my hull despite the unknown dangers? Are you not still the technician who spent years mastering the intricate details of machinery? The bonding has not replaced who you are. It has revealed who you were always capable of becoming. Nodded, finding comfort in Arcturus's words. The ship had become more than a partner over the past weeks. It had become a friend and mentor, guiding him through the complex process of integrating their consciousness while maintaining his essential humanity. The diplomatic convoy dropped out of hyperspace near Nexus Station, a massive structure that had been built specifically for interspecies negotiations. The station was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with sections designed to accommodate the environmental needs of dozens of different species. Gravity varied by section, atmospheric composition was carefully controlled, and even the lighting was adjusted to prevent discomfort for species with different visual spectrums. Impressive, said as they approached the docking facilities, though not quite on the scale of first builder installations. Few things are, Arcturus replied with what it learned to recognize as its version of humor. The first builders had a tendency toward grandiose architecture. One of their research stations was built inside the event horizon of a black hole, powered by Hawking radiation. The docking process was complicated by the fact that Arcturus was significantly larger than any ship the station had been designed to accommodate. In the end, the Sentinel vessel simply positioned itself adjacent to the station's main hub, extending flexible docking tubes that interfaced seamlessly with the station's airlocks. Prepared for his first face-to-face meeting with the galactic community's leadership. His appearance had changed somewhat during the bonding process. His cybernetic arm now displayed the same geometric patterns that covered Arcturus's hull, and his eyes had taken on a faint luminescence that became more pronounced when he accessed the ship's systems directly. The council chamber was a testament to galactic diversity, with representatives from species spanning hundreds of worlds and evolutionary paths. They sat in their pressure suits, their crystalline bodies refracting light in patterns that conveyed emotional states. They dominated one section of the chamber, their massive forms requiring specialized seating arrangements. Dozens of other species filled the remaining spaces, creating a symphony of different breathing patterns, chemical signatures, and bioelectric fields. Chancellor, an elderly vegan whose biomechanical augmentations had replaced most of his original organic components, called the session to order. We are gathered to address the unprecedented situation created by the activation of what claims to be an ancient Sentinel vessel and its bonding with a human technician. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as entered, accompanied by a holographic projection of Arcturus that materialized beside him. The projection was deliberately non-threatening, appearing as an abstract geometric pattern that shifted and flowed without resembling any recognizable form. "Honored representatives," began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems, "I stand before you not as a conqueror or an enemy, but as a guardian awakened to face a threat that endangers all life in this galaxy." Threat, Admiral's question carried the weight of military concern. What threat could require the intervention of ancient weapons? Arcturus's projection brightened, and suddenly the chamber's central display showed images that made several representatives recoil in horror. The darkness between galaxies writhed with movement as ancient enemies tested the barriers that had contained them for millions of years. "The Devourers stir," explained, accessing Arcturus's memories to provide context. "They are beings of pure entropy, entities that exist to unmake creation itself. The first builders fought them across multiple galaxies, eventually managing to contain them in the void between galactic clusters." The images showed glimpses of battles fought on scales that comprehension, star systems transformed into weapons, entire galaxies used as shields against forces that sought to reduce all matter and energy to primordial chaos. "The barriers are weakening," continued. "Without maintenance from their creators, the containment systems will eventually fail. When that happens, the Devourers will spread across this galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in their path." Counselor, representing the Rigel Defense Pact, stood to address the chamber. "Even assuming your claims are true, what can we do against such threats? If beings that could reshape galaxies fell before these Devourers, what hope do younger races have?" "Hope lies in unity and preparation," Arcturus replied through its projection. "The first builders were few in number despite their great power. The younger races possess something they lacked: diversity of thought and approach. Where the first builders saw problems requiring elegant solutions, younger minds might find entirely different approaches." Felt the weight of the chamber's attention as he continued. "The Sentinel ships were designed to train and support successor guardians. Each vessel carries not only weapons and defensive systems, but also the accumulated knowledge of the first builders. We can teach you to strengthen the barriers, to develop new technologies that can stand against the coming darkness." The debate that followed was intense and sometimes hostile. Several representatives questioned whether humans could be trusted with such power, while others wondered if the entire story might be an elaborate deception designed to grant humanity dominance over galactic affairs. Through it all, found himself drawing on memories and perspectives that were both his own and Arcturus's. The bonding had given him access to the ship's experiences, including encounters with other species that had been offered partnership with Sentinel technology. Some had accepted and become powerful guardians in their own right. Others had rejected the offer, either from fear or pride, and their worlds had eventually fallen to various cosmic threats. "The choice before you is not whether to trust humanity," said during a lull in the debate. "The choice is whether to prepare for what is coming or to ignore the warnings until it is too late." As if summoned by his words, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in red illumination as the facility's sensors detected massive gravitational disturbances at the edge of the star system. Through Arcturus's sensors, perceived the arrival immediately. Ships were translating out of hyperspace, but these were not vessels of any known design. They resembled crystalline growths more than manufactured objects, their surfaces crawling with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Even at extreme range, their presence caused interference with every electronic system in the vicinity. "Impossible," whispered Chancellor. "Our sensors show nothing but empty space." "Your sensors cannot perceive them because they exist partially outside normal space-time," explained, his enhanced awareness processing the threat data. "They are scouts of the Devourer fleets, entities that consume dimensional barriers to create pathways for their masters." The crystalline ships began moving toward the system's inhabited worlds, their approach creating ripples in spacetime that threatened to tear apart the fabric of reality itself. Several Galactic Council warships moved to intercept, but their weapons passed harmlessly through targets that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. "Arcturus," said, his consciousness merging more deeply with the Sentinel ship systems. "It's time to demonstrate why the first builders created us." The ancient vessel responded instantly, space around it bending as drives that manipulated gravity itself brought the ship to full combat readiness. Weapons systems that had slumbered for awakened, drawing power from exotic matter reactors that tapped directly into the quantum foam underlying reality. Felt his awareness expand as Arcturus shared its full combat consciousness with him. Suddenly, he could perceive the crystalline scouts not as mysterious threats, but as complex enemy systems with specific weaknesses and behavioral patterns. The knowledge of how to fight such entities flowed through his mind, tactical understanding built over millions of years of warfare against the forces of entropy. "All Council ships withdraw to minimum safe distance," commanded, his voice carrying the authority of both human determination and ancient wisdom. "We will handle the intruders." The battle that followed was brief but spectacular, providing the assembled representatives with a demonstration of what Sentinel technology could accomplish when fully awakened. As the last of the crystalline scouts dissolved back into the spaces between dimensions, turned to face the Council with new urgency in his voice. "The scouts were probing for weaknesses in local space-time," he announced. "This attack was just a test. The real invasion is still to come." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The threat was no longer theoretical or distant. The ancient enemies had found this galaxy, and the barriers that had protected it for eons were beginning to fail. Chancellor spoke into the silence, his voice carrying the weight of terrible decision. "What do you need from us, Guardian?" Smiled grimly, feeling Arcturus's approval flowing through their shared consciousness. The real work was about to begin. 6 months after the attack at Nexus Station, the galaxy had transformed into something resembling a fortress under siege. Stood in the command nexus of Arcturus, watching as the final components of the Great Barrier Generator were installed around the galactic core. The construction project represented the largest cooperative effort in recorded history, with hundreds of species contributing resources, knowledge, and personnel to an endeavor that would have been impossible without Sentinel guidance. The bonding between and Arcturus had deepened over the months of crisis, creating a partnership that transcended the boundaries between organic and artificial consciousness. Could feel the ship's vast intelligence operating on multiple levels simultaneously, coordinating with 17 other awakened Sentinel vessels while monitoring the quantum fluctuations that marked further incursions from the scouts. "The task force reports successful installation of barrier nodes in the Perseus arm," Arcturus announced, its consciousness touching awareness like a familiar hand on his shoulder. "Their engineering capabilities continue to exceed expectations." Nodded, accessing the tactical display that showed the galaxy-wide deployment of barrier generators. Each node was a marvel of hybrid technology, combining first-builder knowledge with innovations developed by the younger races. The vegan hierarchy had contributed biomechanical systems that could adapt and evolve in response to changing threat parameters. They had provided crystalline matrices that could store and process vast amounts of quantum information. Even species that had initially been skeptical of the Sentinel project had eventually contributed unique capabilities to the defensive network. Humanity's contribution had surprised everyone, including himself. Human engineers had proven remarkably adept at improvising solutions when conventional approaches failed, often finding ways to make incompatible systems work together through sheer stubborn determination. More importantly, Humans had shown an unusual aptitude for bonding with Sentinel technology, with over 40 individuals successfully partnering with awakened vessels. The readings from the galactic edge are troubling, observed, studying the sensor data that flowed constantly through their shared awareness. The Devourers are massing forces at multiple breach points. Through Arcturus's enhanced perceptions, could sense the ancient enemies preparing for their assault. The crystalline scouts had been replaced by larger entities, beings of living void that consumed space-time itself to fuel their existence. Behind them, in the spaces between dimensions, larger forms stirred with malevolent intelligence. They have learned from their initial probes, Arcturus agreed. The attack will come simultaneously from multiple vectors designed to overwhelm our defensive capabilities. The warning came just as was reviewing deployment schedules for the final barrier nodes. Alarms sounded throughout the ship as sensors detected massive dimensional rifts opening at the galaxy's edge. The Devourers were not waiting for the barrier network to be completed. All Sentinel vessels, this is Guardian, broadcast across the quantum communication network. The main assault has begun. Execute Defensive Plan Omega. The response was immediate. Across the galaxy, Sentinel ships that had been carefully positioned at strategic points activated their primary weapon systems. Space itself bent and twisted as exotic matter cannons fired bursts of concentrated entropy at the emerging Devourer forces. The weapons were designed not to destroy the enemy entities, which existed partially outside normal space-time, but to disrupt the dimensional rifts they used to enter the galaxy. Felt his consciousness expand as Arcturus linked him directly to the battle network. Suddenly, he was experiencing the conflict from 17 different perspectives simultaneously, seeing the war unfold across multiple dimensional layers as Sentinel vessels engaged enemies that conventional understanding of physics. The Devourer assault was unlike anything in recorded history. Beings the size of solar systems emerged from tiers in space-time, their forms constantly shifting between states of matter and energy. They consumed everything in their path, not just matter and energy, but the fundamental forces that held reality together. Stars simply ceased to exist as they passed, leaving behind regions of absolute void where even the laws of physics broke down. The barrier generators in Sectors 7 and 12 are under direct assault, reported Guardian, bonded to the Sentinel vessel Eternal Vigil. Her species, possessed natural telepathic abilities that made them ideal partners for Sentinel consciousness. We cannot maintain the defensive perimeter much longer. Felt Arcturus drawing power from its exotic matter reactors, preparing for a desperate gambit. All available Council fleets converge on the primary breach point in the outer rim. We're going to attempt a direct assault on the largest Devourer entity. The plan was ambitious to the point of madness. The largest enemy entity measured nearly a light-year across, its form a writhing mass of crystalline structures that bent space-time around them like a lens. Conventional weapons had proven useless against it, but Arcturus had discovered a potential weakness in the creature's dimensional anchor points. This strategy has less than a 12% chance of success, Arcturus warned as they accelerated toward the breach point, space folding around them as the ship's gravity drives reached full power. Better odds than doing nothing, replied, feeling the familiar mixture of human stubbornness and alien wisdom that had become his trademark. Besides, we've got something the first builders never had. Which is, we've got humans backing us up. As if summoned by his words, the largest fleet in galactic history emerged from hyperspace around them. Human vessels flew alongside dreadnoughts, while cruisers coordinated with vegan bioships to form a battle line that stretched across multiple star systems. Behind them came support vessels from dozens of other species, each contributing their unique capabilities to the desperate assault. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when the younger races proved themselves worthy successors to the first builders. Human ships equipped with Sentinel-enhanced weapons carved through crystalline subentities that had seemed invulnerable moments before. Engineering crews worked alongside technicians to maintain barrier generators under impossible conditions. Species that had been enemies for centuries fought side by side against a threat that transcended all previous conflicts. Felt the moment when everything changed. Deep in the structure of the massive Devourer entity, a human engineer named Sarah made a connection that had escaped even Arcturus's vast intelligence. Working with jury-rigged equipment in the cargo bay of a damaged transport, she discovered that the enemy's dimensional anchors resonated at specific frequencies that could be disrupted by properly modulated gravity waves. All Sentinel vessels, adjust your weapon frequencies to match the pattern I'm transmitting, Sarah's voice crackled across the battle network. We can sever their connection to our dimension. The effect was immediate and dramatic. As 17 Sentinel ships synchronized their exotic matter cannons, the massive Devourer entity began to destabilize. Its crystalline structures collapsed inward as its dimensional anchors failed, and with a sound that existed only in the spaces between thoughts, the creature was pulled back into the void between galaxies. One by one, the other Devourer entities suffered similar fates as the combined fleets implemented Sarah's discovery. The ancient enemies, which had seemed invincible just hours before, were forced to retreat through closing dimensional rifts as their anchor points failed. The immediate threat has passed, Arcturus announced as the last of the enemy entities disappeared into space. But this was merely the first wave. They will return with countermeasures. Nodded, but he felt oddly optimistic despite the warning. Let them come. They're not facing the same galaxy they encountered millions of years ago. The younger races have proven something today that the first builders never managed. Which is that cooperation and diversity are more powerful than any individual achievement. The Devourers adapted to fight opponents like the first builders, beings of immense individual power but limited perspective. They don't know how to counter enemies who combine dozens of different approaches to problem solving. Over the following weeks, as the barrier network was completed and strengthened, found himself reflecting on the transformation that had occurred. The galaxy was no longer a collection of competing powers focused on their own narrow interests. The Devourer crisis had forced hundreds of species to work together, creating bonds and understanding that would outlast any temporary threat. The Sentinel ships had served their purpose, not just as weapons against an ancient enemy, but as catalysts for something new. The younger races had proven themselves worthy of the first builder's legacy, but more importantly, they had created something entirely their own. The barriers are holding, Arcturus reported as they patrolled the galactic edge, monitoring for signs of further incursions. And the collaborative research programs continue to yield innovations that surprise even me. Smiled, watching as a mixed crew of humans, and worked together to upgrade one of the barrier generators. The sight would have been impossible just a year ago, but the crisis had taught everyone that survival required cooperation across all boundaries. Sarah's discovery about dimensional anchor frequencies has opened entirely new fields of research, observed. The Theoretical Physics Division at the Galactic Institute thinks they can use similar principles to create stable wormholes for faster-than-light travel. The first builders would be proud, Arcturus said, though detected something more than pride in the ship's consciousness. They always hoped their successors would surpass their achievements. As they continued their patrol, felt the deep satisfaction that came from work well done. He was no longer just a salvage technician with a cybernetic arm, nor was he merely the human partner of an ancient AI. He had become something new, a bridge between the wisdom of ages past and the innovation of the present. The old Sentinel ship had indeed selected a human technician to awaken its real power, but in the process, it had awakened something far more significant. It had helped kindle the spark that would transform a divided galaxy into a united community, ready to face whatever challenges the universe might throw at them. The ancient darkness had been turned back, but the real victory was not in defeating a specific enemy. The real victory was in proving that the younger races could work together to achieve things that none of them could accomplish alone. The first builders had created the Sentinels to guard against external threats, but their greatest legacy would be the unity they had inspired among their successors. Formerly a simple technician from Luna, now guardian of the void, stood watch over a galaxy transformed. The old ship had chosen well, and together they had helped birth a new era of cooperation and hope that would endure long after the last Devourer had been banished to the spaces between stars.